Hi, this is Ingrid, and welcome to Liminal Knits, which is a channel dedicated mainly to knitting. And I live in the middle, I always say the middle of the United States of America, with my husband and 2 dogs and a part-time son because he is in college and is there more often than he's at home these days. So the connection to that is to the title of the podcast, Liminal Knits, is when I first conceived of doing this, my son was a senior in high school, and I sort of felt like we were at this in-between space, in this liminal space. So liminal, you probably know, means the space between two other spaces. So I was just sort of in a period in my life where I was undergoing this transition, from having kids in the house to being empty nesters. So I thought, well, what a great concept. And then I started thinking about how that relates with knitting, which is that knitting is really a liminal process. If we just wanted a finished sweater, we would just order a finished sweater or buy a finished sweater, but we make them. So, now there's the whole debate between process and product knitters, etc. So whatever side you fall on with that, we are largely sort of in this in-between space. And then I started thinking, well, in some ways we're in this in-between space at a lot of different times in our lives. So I thought that what a better name, for a podcast than something that has to do with, recognizing that sometimes we're just in the middle between two different states of being. And I know I found myself in that place in many times in my life, and maybe I'm sure you have too. So that's where the title comes from. And like I said, I live kind of in the middle of the U.S., where there is a lot of need for knitted garments. Today, I think the high was 15, but that was pretty warm. Our high was like negative, in the negative digits Fahrenheit just a few days ago. So, and it will be again this weekend. So we're always looking for something warm to wear. But I didn't always live someplace that was like that. I grew up in the southern U.S. where there was hardly a need for knitted garments. So I could talk a little bit about my knitting journey. I started knitting when I was in my 20s, and I lived in Seattle at the time, and it was the Stitch and Bitch era, and so it was kind of cool and trendy and hip to knit, and so I started knitting with a friend there, and I've knit fairly consistently throughout my adult life. I'm not as productive as some other knitters. I don't know whether that's because I put it down and pick it up so much. There's a saying in cycling, if you want to go a long distance, you just have to kind of stay on the bike. And I think sometimes I don't just stay on the bike when it comes to knitting. Sometimes I get distracted by other hobbies or just life in general. There were whole years that went by where I didn't knit, but I have been knitting for a long time. So it's something that I really enjoy, and now I'm starting to try to think about how to broaden my skill set and that kind of thing with my knitting. So I just sort of did this on a whim today, and the light is waning somewhat, so it won't be a long podcast. I just thought I'd talk a little bit about the things that I'm working on right now, and the things I'm looking forward to working on in the not too distant future. I'm not really, I don't think of myself as a monogamous knitter, but as I was looking around for things to talk about, I realized I'm only really working on one thing right now. So, and that is a sweater called, and I'm probably going to get this wrong, pronunciation wise, but Afmaeli, Afmaeli, which was a free sweater. It was an anniversary sweater put out by the people who put out the Lettlopi yarn. And so I have 2 sleeves done, which I'm very excited about. So here's sleeve number 1, and those are all my increases there, and so you can kind of get an idea of what the colorway is going to be here. And if I can figure it out, I will put a link to the pattern in the notes at the bottom, and then we have our second sleeve here. So yeah, the color turned out a little bit, this gray turned out to be a little bit lighter excuse me, a little bit darker than what I was expecting. I did mail order this, but if you've never knit with Icelandic wool, it's really interesting. What I love about it, it is pretty toothy. So, but what I love about it is if you just happen to pull your needle out of it by mistake, those stitches just stand there ready for you to come back and pick them up patiently. They don't go anywhere. They're very, it's very toothy yarn, so you don't have to worry. Some yarns, if you drop a slip, all of a sudden it's just unraveling. It feels like before your very eyes. But this isn't going anywhere. It's just going to wait for you to come patiently to come back and pick it up. So I'm looking forward to starting on the body. I did both of the sleeves first. I thought I didn't really want to do a gauge swatch for this. My gauge swatching in the round, it tends not to be the same as it is flat, and most of the methods that I've tried to mimic knitting in the round for a gauge swatch haven't really been successful. So I do tend to knit on gauge for most patterns. So I just decided to use these as a gauge swatch, and I think it worked out pretty well. So we'll see, though. I'm sort of in between sizes on this sweater, so we'll see how that turns out. So I'd be curious to hear if you have experience, with gauge swatches. Theoretically, I believe in gauge swatches, but every time I do them, I can't. Sometimes they cause me more questions than they answer questions. So if you have any feelings about that, put it down in the comments. I'd like to hear them. So that's project number one that I'm working on. And the other project that I really haven't been working on since Christmas, to be honest, is I bit the bullet and did the is it Cosy Sock Company? I have the name a little bit wrong, but I can put it in the notes at the bottom. But I did the Advent sock. Well, it's not looking so good when I hold it up like that. All right, the things you see, but this has the afterthought heel, which is why I sort of stalled on these. I was doing really well on these. In fact, I was kind of knitting ahead, 2 or 3 stripes. I have both of them, actually. I did 2 at a time. And then there's the afterthought. Wait, where is it? There it is. And then I kind of got to the part where I didn't really know what I was doing. She said to knit 2 inches below the place where you're going to put the afterthought heel in, and then I just sort of stalled out because I chickened out. That happens sometimes. Maybe it happens to you. When I get to the part of the pattern that I'm unsure about, then something else looks more interesting to me. So these will probably be something that I pick up because I think I enjoy the idea of these socks, but these socks did not feel even remotely Christmassy to me. So I also lost a little bit of steam because I thought these look more like summer socks to me. So I will probably get more excited about knitting these as we get closer to summer. I'm not a super dedicated sock knitter. I've knit more socks for other people. I seem to be good about finishing them for other people, but not so much for myself. And I tend to knit them too big for myself. So I have a few pair that I've knit, but usually they're a little large, and you would think, okay, Ingrid, why don't you just go down a size? And I have done that, and it's worked out a little bit better for me. But I'm a person who loves the idea of knitting socks, but I'm not a prolific sock knitter. And so, I was going to say one other thing about the Icelandic sweater that I'm knitting is that there's a great book that I just really got into the idea of Icelandic sweaters for this year. And so there's this great book called the Lopeyesa sweater. It's more like a glorified magazine, I'd say. I mean, I guess it's a book, but it has that sort of really thin feeling cover. So there you go, by Tony Carr, it says. And this is a really great book about going to Iceland and the history of the Lopeyesa sweater, which actually doesn't go back as far as you might think. Don't imagine that they were wearing these back in the 1600s or something, because that appears to be a more recent phenomenon. But that's okay. They're really amazing sweaters. And there's lots of great photography. Look, I love it. In the book. So it's really interesting and really worth it. And we have a lot of time here where I live where it's, maybe I don't wear a lot of jackets. It tends to kind of go from being not that nice to, or being nice to like, you really need a warm coat. So I have this idea that I'm going to wear mine as sort of a jacket, like to walk the dog in the spring. So that's my hope, is that I'm going to have it done by then. But, but a great book if you're interested at all in learning about Icelandic sweaters. And all right, so I think that's really all I'm working on right now. I did knit a lot of hats over the Christmas time. I tend to give hats as gifts. I probably knit 7 or 8 hats, so I like to have small projects like that on the go. But that's sort of what I've been working on. What I hope to be working on is I have unwrapped to me some linen quill from Pearl Soho for the infamous half and half triangle wrap. And so our in-laws are taking us on a cruise. We're having a family reunion this summer, so I am knitting this for my mother-in-law in some sort of like beachy, watery, like a turquoise and the celadine green color. So when those come in, I will share that with you and talk about the process. I'm a little intimidated. I haven't historically done really well at large projects that are just sort of the same thing over and over again. So this will be a little bit of a stretch for me, but I am excited. I've seen so many beautiful ones, and so many people seem to want to knit it over and over again. So I think that says something for the pattern as well. All right, anything else? The one final thing that I'm working on, I'm not really a designer in any way, shape, or form, but I have a friend who, it's really a friend of my son's, who walks with a cane, and she was talking with me about the difficulty of being able to wear mittens while walking with a cane. Because if you think about it, you can't really get a good grip on a cane while you have a mitten on. So she and I started putting our heads together and trying to find some sort of solution for that, and she drew up a couple things. But I also found this pattern for something called pogies, which look like this, and they go over I don't know what you would call it, an oar for rowers. But I thought this would actually be perfect because this just has the opening on one side, so the cane could go in there and then the hand could go around it, so you could still have traction on the cane, and then you wouldn't lose the traction with the cane. So that's something that I started this version of it is in fingering weight. I'm going to try to work one up in either a DK or a worsted, so it goes a little bit faster. I don't really know that there would be any benefit to having it in a fingering weight, but if you have any ideas about adaptive sort of mittens, yeah, definitely let me know below. But this seemed like this might work, and so I'm kind of excited to play around with that and see if I can't get something to work. But anyway, that's sort of it. The way I envision I don't even know what to call it. It would be helpful if I knew what to call these. Is something fairly short. I really love the long form, if we can call it that, blog posts. Where people talk for an hour and 15 minutes. I love to get my knitting and sit down and listen to those, but I don't envision that mine will probably go that long. There's a few people that I listen to who's tend to be a little bit shorter. I think of Wool Needle Hands, Taylor, are short. She has such a great command too of this form and incorporating things in. I think it'll be a while before I'm that adept with editing, but one can hope. And then I also love A Friend to Knit With, Leslie Friends. She tends to have 15 to 25 minute episodes, and she's just so interesting and lovely. So that's sort of my hope, is to be sort of in that niche, and just try, I think, to be a part of the conversation. And I think most people, it's kind of like taking yoga teacher training in the hopes that you'll do more yoga. I'm hoping that, participating will help me also put a little bit of fire in my knitting and provide knitting community as well. So I hope this finds you doing well, and thank you so much for listening. And please do like and subscribe, and I will see you soon.